I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Lisa, would you please assure that we have a physical quorum?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Allender.
Here.
Jordan. Lober.
Here.
Minus.
Here.
Pritchett. Smith. Young.
Here.
Gibson.
Here.
Kellum. Price. Did I miss anybody that's physically in the room? Did I miss anybody? Okay, and then virtually, I believe we have Ms. Koss.
I hear participating virtually during the month of May due to having been in a car accident and having injuries.
Okay, thank you very much. Madam Chair, we do have quorum.
Thank you very
If you'd
much.
like to-
And we will need to vote on approval for Ms. Koss. Can I get a motion?
Second.
And a second by Ms. Minus. Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Thank you. Motion passes. Ms. Koss is able to attend virtually. Thank you. Laura, would you please review the methods on public comment?
Yes, thank you. This afternoon, for those that are attending from the public virtually, you may participate in today's meeting by looking at your GoToWebinar icons. You may submit a question in the question box or utilize the chat. Comments will be accepted after the meeting also by emailing lisa.hickman@brevardfl.gov, or you may call our office at 321-690-6890. Again, written comments will be accepted no later than 3 business days after today's meeting.
Thank you. Thank you, Laura. Do we have any public comments for non-agenda items?
I do not have.
Thank you. And we do have one speaker card for agenda item number 7, which we'll hear from Ms. Sullivan at that time. All right, reports. Georgiana.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here in person. It's good to see everyone. There are a few items that I wanted to cover from the director's report on page 3. The Central Florida MPO Alliance met on April the 9th, and you have the meeting highlights and presentation links if you would like to review some of those presentations. Also, the Florida Metropolitan Planning Organization Advisory Council, the MPOAC, met on April 29th. And the council adopted a regional freight priority list, which will be shared with the Florida Department of Transportation for consideration of the upcoming 5-year work program cycle. And of course, Ellis Road and the 528 widening are 2 projects that was on that freight priority list. So adopting it on a statewide level is very good to show the DOT those priorities that are the most important for Brevard County. We also received a presentation from NARC, which is the National Association of Regional Councils. And they discussed some of the COVID recovery bills and the FAST Act reauthorization and alternative transportation revenue mechanisms. And I'll discuss all of those items when we talk about funding a little later in the agenda. As you know, the legislative session is over and the Regional Planning Council bill did not appear in the last days of session. So we were happy to hear that. And also the red light mid-block crossing bills did not pass. It's my understanding that it could have went either way, but the Senate, I think they were a little more concerned about how costly it might be, not only for DOT, but for the local governments throughout Florida. But either way, it will most definitely probably be coming back up in session next year. And there's a lot of conversations that we are having locally with the DOT. And I know that DOT is also having conversations with the legislature on ways to improve in that area. So stay tuned. Let's see here. You also have the USDOT issued a notice of funding opportunity for a grant that was formerly known as Tiger, and then it was called Build, and now it's called RAISE, Rebuilding American Infrastructure with Sustainability and Equity. So I think every administration just changes the name a little bit. But this is an opportunity to submit grants with a $25 million project cap. Applications are due by July 12th of this year, and Florida received roughly around $50 million last year for 2 projects in the Tampa Bay area. And these projects are available in the first year. So, you know, it's different than our funding where we work with the DOT and we may program projects in the 5th or 6th year. And you all look at us like, you know, we're crazy because you're wondering why in the world is it taking so long? This funding is available in the first year, but there is a catch, and that is that it requires a 25% match to leverage that federal dollar, as with all of these US DOT grants. But it is something I wanted to make you aware of. And if there are projects, you know, in your municipality or in your area that are priorities of the TPO and you think that they are feasible projects to move forward and that we could come up with a match, please let us know and we would be happy to work with you on that. Also, the TPO has scheduled 2 wayfinding workshops in May for our multi-use trails and trailheads master plan. These are trails located in the North Brevard County area, so we're really excited about that. And the TPO will also host a webinar on June 3rd as part of our Transportation Thursday webinar series, and this one is going to be called FDOT Partnership. And so we're going to kind of review ways that the municipalities and the county can work with FDOT on those partnerships. And Secretary Jared Perdue, the District 5 Secretary, has agreed to participate. So we're excited. This will be our first webinar on this subject. Also, I wanted to remind our members, our next TPO meeting, of course, will be July 8th. We don't meet in June. We're off in June, similar to the County Commission. But the Executive Committee will be meeting prior to the Governing Board meeting in July. And so we meet at 1 p.m. just prior to the Governing Board meeting at 2. So for those Executive Committee members, wanted to put that on your radar. And of course, we'll be reaching out with you to make sure that you are aware of that. And 2 last things. Kim has some pedestrian tip cards that she is really dying to give out to our members. If you could take those back, you can put them in your city halls, in your businesses. And this is just some information that we really want to try to get out there. So please see Kim and grab a handful of them. We would really appreciate it. And then one last thing, we would like Abby to come up and just give a brief overview of some upcoming public involvement opportunities for the TPO.
Good afternoon. My name is Abby Hemingway, and I'm the Public Involvement Officer for the Space Coast TPO. And before we briefly talk about some upcoming public involvement opportunities for May and June, I did want to talk about some wins that our organization recently had in the spring months. So first, at the end of March, the TPOs partnered with FDOT District 5 in Alert Today, Florida, to promote Bike Month by coordinating a safety education pop-up event on the US 192 corridor near Melbourne Square Mall. Staff and volunteers were stationed along the roadway, and we held signs to remind drivers to look right for bicyclists. They were also inside the mall speaking with shoppers. We were able to operate as a visual cue to motorists that day to look for bicyclists and to share the road. The event actually led to an extended relationship with the mall, which agreed to showcase bicycle safety literature within their table inserts in the food court. The event was a huge success and a great example of how partnership is so vital to public education. So here's just a little collage of that day of the FDOT volunteers and staff and TPO staff. And then in April, the TPO received an image award from the Space Coast chapter of the Florida Public Relations Association for its 2020 Minton Road Feasibility Study virtual public meeting. The local image awards competition is conducted annually to recognize outstanding public relations programs and to encourage and promote the development of PR in our area. The award recognized the TPO's submission as the top scoring entry for the public relations program category, and it was an awesome way to celebrate the end of that study. So coming up in May, it's probably no surprise, you've probably seen this on social media, May is National Bike Month, so we are partnering with the American League of Bicyclists to celebrate biking as transportation, recreation, and that is essential to our well-being. Whether you bike for fitness, for fun, with your family, it's really starting to become part of a movement for safer streets and connected communities. One thing you might want to mark on your calendars, you may see more bikes this day. May 21st is Bike to Work Day. May is also Motorcycle Safety Awareness Month. It's probably to no surprise that motorcyclists are significantly overrepresented in traffic crashes and fatalities every year. In 2019 alone, there were over 5,000 motorcyclists killed in the US in traffic crashes. They also, motorcyclist death account for 14% of total highway fatalities that year. So this month we'll be partnering with Ride Safe Florida or Ride Smart Florida, and we'll be putting out some safety messages, working with our local PIOs and municipalities and law enforcement agencies to push those messages. Other social media spotlights. This week was National Police Week, so if you haven't yet, give your local law enforcement department a shout out. Next week is EMS Week, and then of course Memorial Day, we always pay remembrance, but we also highlight safe driving and driving sober. And then as Georgiana mentioned, we do have Transportation Thursday coming up on June 3rd. Registration for that is on our website. We'll also be putting it out in our newsletter next week. If you don't get our newsletter, please see me so I can get you signed up. And then lastly, it is time for our open house again. We do this every summer. So this year's open house will be in a virtual format. We actually saw a lot of success last year when we held it virtually. It's a lot easier for the public to attend that way, especially on a weeknight. It's free to attend. Registration is required. It will begin at 5:30 p.m. on June 16th. And the annual open house, for those who don't know about it, it's an opportunity to discuss trending projects in Brevard and specifically to talk about the proposed 2022-2026 Transportation Improvement Program. This outlines all the projects that are on the docket for the next 5 years. We'll also be chatting about how new aspects of transportation planning are transforming the ways we work, play, and live within our communities. So we hope that you'll be able to attend. That's all I have.
That was very good. Can you tell me, what was that number? How many motorcyclists?
A little over 5,000 in 2019
Wow.
in the
Thank
nation.
you.
Right now, year to date, in Brevard County, a little over 26% of our
Motorcyclists. Wow. Thank you for that information.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, that concludes the director's report.
All right. Thank you very much, Georgiana. All right. We'll go on with the next item, the Technical and Citizens Advisory Committee report. Georgiana?
The Technical and Citizens Advisory Committee met on Monday, and at your place, you have a handout, or in your handout box, if you're attending virtually, you will find a summary of actions and attendance for the meeting. The committees recommend the TPO approve the consent agenda as well as the fiscal year 21 through 25 TIP amendment. In your package, you also have the draft CAC minutes of March the 8th and the attendance record for your information. That concludes my report, Madam Chair.
All right. Thank you. And next we'll have the Bicycle, Pedestrian, and Trails Committee report. Sarah? Not sure I saw Sarah.
Good afternoon. I apologize that I can't be there in person with you today. Can everyone hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Very good. So I'm Sarah Crom. I'm the Senior Transportation Planner for the Space Coast TPO. The Bicycle and Pedestrian and Trails Advisory Committee last met on March 29th. There were no significant action items, and so we did meet virtually for informational purposes only. We received a member showcase presentation from Mr. Murray Hahn, a FDOT work program recap, which basically focused in on one of the bike ped projects that were in the FDOT work program presentation you received in February. And then FDOT District 5 is currently working on a bicycle and pedestrian master plan. And so Stephanie Moss, our FDOT BPAC rep, did give us a presentation on that project. On April 26th, next slide, April 26th, we held our annual walking workshop. Thank you to Melbourne, especially Tammy Gillen and Todd Corwin for being our guides that evening as we walked along Hickory Street, which is one of the complete streets that we have here in Brevard. So it's a really nice evening to get out and explore a project that the TPO and BPAC were able to make happen. Also, we did hold our ADA bus stop training. We had an in-person and a virtual session. If you missed it and would like to see it, we have the virtual one recorded on our YouTube and also on our website. So, and with that, that concludes my BPAC report.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you very much. Next will be the FDOT report. Anna Taylor.
Hi, good afternoon. Anna Taylor, FDOT. Just two quick announcements. Next Tuesday, May 18th, the department will be hosting a hybrid format public meeting for the Badcock Corridor Planning Study. That will be held in person at the Melbourne City Hall, and there will also be an online component. We also want to let you guys know that the High Visibility Enforcement Program's new cycle will be opening this July. So we are currently wrapping up the eligibility for the 2022 agencies, and we'll be reaching out to you guys probably next month. Last year, we did have Palm Bay and Brevard County Sheriff's Office participate in that program, and we hope to have them back this year. Your construction report is in your packets, and I can take any questions if you have any.
Any questions for Ms. Taylor? No?
Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Next item is the consent agenda, and that is Georgiana.
All right, so the entire consent agenda can be passed in one motion, and I'll read aloud for the record. Approval of the governing board minutes of March the 10th. Committee appointments, approval of work order for our 2020 State of the System scope of services, and then approval of resolution 2119 recommending the Brevard Board of County Commissioners continue as the community transportation coordinator for Brevard County, and this designation is just up for renewal.
Motion to approve, Lober.
Did you get that? Ms. Minus? Okay. All right. Thank you. All in favor of passing the consent agenda, signify.
Aye.
All those opposed? All right, thank you. Motion passes. Next item, this will be a roll call vote we'll take on this, and this is a resolution. Georgiana?
Yes, so this is a housekeeping item. The Florida Department of Transportation is requesting an amendment to our adopted transportation improvement program. And this is to align our plan with the department's work program. And one of the amendments is for the construction funding for the widening of Space Commerce Way, over $24 million. That was received from an infrastructure grant. And so that funding needs to be reflected in our TIP. And there's also 3 capital grant transit projects as well. And then you also have an add-on at your place. This was for really a minor amendment, the NASA Causeway Bridge replacement that we approved last month or the month before last. This is a limit change. Instead of going all the way to Space Commerce Way, this will just be for the replacement of the bridge. So it's a minor limit change to the project. And so we are asking for approval of our TIP amendment.
Georgiana,
Yes, ma'am.
this is Lorraine. I had a question, and maybe it's something I should understand better than I do. But I was noting the small urban capital grant to Titusville and wondering how one prioritizes, how you get prioritized for something like that. I ask because in Cocoa, of course, we were impacted by COVID. We have 30% living under the national poverty level. We have food deserts, and the transit system is not particularly good for those 13% of households that have no car and literally have to get around on a bike or by mass transit.
Councilmember Cost, that is a very good question, and I may have to call on Terry to answer that question. And I'm not sure if he's had an opportunity to look at this particular amendment. This is for FTA funding. So how does that process work for application of that sort of grant? Terry's coming to the podium.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, Councilman Costs. So the process is actually a designation that is outside of Space Coast Area Transit and outside of the county. I can actually contact you directly or even forward the information for a future follow-up to this meeting on the specifics. It's a little bit more complex than I can explain right now, but it's a designation, like I mentioned, that is done at the FTA level for the corridors that the service is provided to.
Okay.
But I'll be glad to get you the details on that information directly as well.
I would appreciate that. We have some discussions coming up on our bus stops and mass transit. Thank you.
You're welcome.
We will follow up on that, council member. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Terry, and thank you, Georgina. Mr. Lober, you have a comment?
Yes, ma'am. Oh, that's loud. I'm sorry. Just real briefly, and I'm sorry to kind of press the issue, but I'm just curious, to your understanding, is this something where the city had submitted to the feds some sort of application package? I'm just trying to get even a general understanding.
Actually, it's an annual process exactly that way, but it's more or less, as Georgina mentioned earlier, it's our housekeeping where we continuously submit for a request for funding more than anything else, but it's not something that is designated and changed each year.
But in terms of how it ended up being Titusville, and I have no issue with Titusville getting it, I'm just curious, as Councilwoman Cost had mentioned, for Cocoa, for instance, to get on the lineup, is this something that they would work with you to put together an application package to send up, or do they do it as a city separate and apart from any sort of county governance or county association?
It will be working through Space Coast Area Transit, yes.
Okay, I appreciate that. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Any other comments on this particular item resolution? I think I heard a motion, Ms. Pritchett. In a second. And I need a name for the second. I'm sorry. Yes, I do. Mr. Jordan. I'm sorry. Heaven knows, Mr. Jordan. Sorry. Thank you very much. Did you get that, Lisa?
I did.
Let me blame it on you. No, thank you.
Okay, so
All right,
I
we have a
may now-
motion, we have a second. All in favor of passing the resolution, vote aye. Those opposed? Thank you very much. Motion passes.
and now I'll perform the roll call
And I'm
for
the
this
one that said
item.
we need a roll call. I'm sorry. Lisa, would you do
I'm
the roll
ready.
call?
Allender, Jordan. Yes, sir. Cost,
Yes.
Lober. Minus. Pritchett. Robinson. Smith. Young.
Aye.
Gibson.
Aye.
Kellum. Price. Thank you.
And again, I apologize, Mr. Jordan, sincerely. Look at that. He'll get me, he'll get me. All right, let's move on to the next item before I mess up again. Presentations. Georgiana.
All right, so the first one, the Central Florida Expressway 2045 Master Plan. Laura Kelly, the Executive Director of CFX, wanted me to apologize to the members for postponing this presentation. The governor appointed 2 new board members to CFX. So there has been a lot going on there, in their area. And also due to the fact that we were not involved, this TPO was not involved in the original 2040 master plan development. And we also have a Brevard County representative, Commissioner Smith, that serves on the CFX board. She wanted to be here in person and not have a staff member present today, which was the original plan. And so she would like to postpone this to September, and she'd like to come and present and meet all of the board members. So she does apologize for that. So we will be postponing this item.
Thank you, Georgiana. Next presentation.
Oh, yes, this is item 7. Yes, we have a speaker for this.
Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry. Ms. Sullivan. Oh, Sandra Sullivan.
Good afternoon, Sandra Sullivan, South Patrick Shores. So I've been doing a lot of research and looking at their plans online. And both their 20-year out plan and this plan. And they're looking at of course, the crossing the state to more paths to this, to the county. There was recently a conversation coming up about putting tolls through the county. And while I'm in favor of tolls to the county, I'm not in favor of tolls within the county. And I would encourage when this discussion comes up to look to Miami and the lawsuits that they have going on down there with MDX. My husband is actually in the, he's a PE with bridge and road construction. And down there, his boss pays $8 to get to work. We're in a time of COVID and we have a lot of people impacted locally. I mean, we're coming out of it, but at this time, this is especially not good timing for many people to burden the working population going to work with yet another cost. I also reached out to our state legislative members to see how they feel on this. And I'll put this on the record, but this is a response from Representative Tyler Sororas, whose district this is for the State Road 528. He said, "Thank you for your email." This is from staff. Representative Sororas does not support State Road 520, tolls on State Road 528. And I would encourage this board to not consider tolls within the county itself as being very problematic. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Ms. Sullivan. Thank you
Madam
very
Chair.
much.
Madam Chair,
Yes, Ms. Lober,
may I just very briefly?
please.
Okay, and I see we have at least 2 other commissioners here, so I'm going to be careful how I phrase this so we don't have any potential issues with respect to having a communication outside of a notice commission meeting. But I would point out we have had discussion at the commission level specifically on that point. So with respect to the commission's position, again, I'm going to kind of keep it tight and narrow here, but I think there has been some discussion with respect to that may be worth considering. And I do anticipate it's something that's probably going to come up again before the county commission, at least before the county commission takes any particular action, if we end up taking any action at all on the request.
Thank you, Mr. Lober. Would anyone else like to comment on this? Yes, Mr. Smith? Commissioner Smith?
I would remind everybody that this is very, very preliminary. I would remind people that control factor is a minuscule part of the entire discussion. The primary discussion that CFX brought forth, is to upgrade 528, which I think anybody that travels 528 will admit.
Excuse me, Commissioner. I'm just sticking to the mic thing.
The primary purpose of the discussion.
We good? There we go. Primary purpose of the discussion is to look long range, 10 years, 20 years out. Where is this county going to be if 528 isn't improved? Where is this county going to be if 528 continues to deteriorate? Where is this county going to be if bridges over the Indian River Lagoon and the Banana River that we know are already in need of repair? What happens if they're not replaced? What happens to sea level rise, sustainability? That's another subject. What about the lack of flow in the Indian River and the Banana River because of the causeways? All these things have to be discussed. So the fact that there's perhaps a toll in the offing is really, 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 in my perspective, and I think most people that, responsible people that think about this, that's for another time. We haven't even gotten to the point yet where we're moving forward with anything. So I think what started this was Dan Billow did an interview with me on Channel 2 Thursday or Friday night last week. And we have discussed this at CFX. But to his credit, at the beginning, he said Commissioner Smith wants to see an upgrade of the road, the upgrade of safety on the road and lighting on the road. But then he left that and hit me with kind of a gotcha at the very end. And he said, so, you know, Brevard County doesn't have any tolls anywhere on any road. And Brevard County inhabitants were told that when the toll was removed from 528 and he was there, he says, this is where the toll booth used to be, that there would never be another toll. Well, I got that out of the blue. I had no idea that question was coming. It was a typical gotcha question. And so his question to me then was, are you willing to break that promise? And I said, yes, I am, because times changed. That was 30 or 40 years ago. And this road isn't going to get fixed on its own. He left that last sentence out. But after I did some research and I thought about it, I discovered that Brevard County already has a toll on that 528. The last toll you pay when you're traveling east on 528, that toll goes to FDOT. CFX collects it, but it's an FDOT toll. So this baloney about tolls and we don't want to pay tolls and tolls are dastardly and tolls get you where you want to be sometimes. And in this particular case, perhaps that is the case. Maybe tolls are necessary to help get this thing done because we know we've talked to FDOT for a long, long time. There's been an awful lot of non-movement on the issue of getting this road fixed and repaired and replaced. And another thing that you should keep in mind is the fact that when the port is in full function, which I anticipate, we all hope that it will be sooner rather than later, there's some 40,000 to 50,000 cars per week that travel from OIA to that port. Those people are going to help you pay for this if there is a toll. They're going to help you pay for your improved road. And everybody knows that this road needs to be improved and it needs to be sooner rather than later. And the beauty of having CFX involved is that they're actually a local organization. They're very well run and they're very responsive to issues that need to be addressed. FDOT is this big thing in the sky up in Tallahassee. And I think an awful lot of people don't feel real close to them because they are kind of distant. So having CFX buy this road is a possibility. CFX owns the rest of 528, so it only makes sense that they own the rest of it. And if we're to move forward, I think tolls have to be considered. Whether there will be one, I don't know. But I'm not going to stand here and lie to you and say yes or no, because I don't know. I just simply tell you that it's likely, because the road has to be paid for some way. And I'll tell you another interesting statistic. CFX, we give everybody a discount. So if you have your transponder in your car and the toll is say 25 cents, you're only going to get charged like 19 cents. If the toll is $3, you'll pay like $2.65 or some reduction. So we give you discounts. Would you believe that most people in Central Florida, when they travel on CFX, you know, if you don't have a transponder and you don't pay cash, you pay toll by plate, right? So you not only pay the full freight of the toll, you also pay the carrying charge, which can be $1.50 just for the bill. 49% of the people that pay tolls on the Central Florida Expressway roads do toll by plate. That's boggling. That boggles my mind. And it boggles the mind of CFX. So we did a survey of the people that pay toll by plate. And the answer simply overwhelmingly is it's just easier. So there's an awful lot of people that don't mind tolls. So that's a long-winded explanation, but I think it was necessary because of the misinformation that gets started and rumors get started and people's imagination gets going. You know, I fielded a question, well, you know, what if it's going to be $6? Well, based on the rest of the tolls that are CFX charges, I can't imagine it would be $6. And I asked the leadership of CFX. And they said it would be commensurate with whatever we charge anywhere else. We would do a traffic study and we would determine how many cars there are and what we need to pay for the road and keep it upkeep. And I think all of you will recognize the fact that every road that CFX runs throughout Central Florida is immaculate. You don't see trash on the side of the roads. You don't see tin cans that have been chopped up by lawnmowers that just sit there for days and weeks on end, and more paper that gets chopped up. The roads are a tribute to the people that live in Central Florida, and they will do the same thing when you're talking about an entrance to the port. And I said that in this interview. We have a world-class port there. We do not have a world-class entrance, and it's not safe. I was talking to one of the port commissioners yesterday, and he said, Kurt, you have no idea how unsafe this road is. He said, particularly when we have a launch, because we have to put all those concrete barriers up to keep people from crossing the road to get a better view on the other side or whatever. And he said, if the launch doesn't go, guess what? We have to take all those things down and then put them back up again. He said, this port and the roads that come into it are a pure safety hazard. So it needs to get done, folks. So whether it's FDOT that does it and charges you a toll, if it's CFX that does it and charges you for a toll, or if either one does it and doesn't charge you for a toll, this is all going to be worked out in the end. So I wouldn't get your socks in a wad over anything at this point in time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Smith, for the insight. That was very helpful and very substantive to this meeting. Thank you so much.
Next time I'll work on a long answer.
All right, let's move on to the next item. The next item then, that is Georgiana.
All right. Well, that was right on point, I think, for this presentation, which is about transportation funding. And I wanted to kind of give a short overview of transportation funding in Florida, and I thought it might be especially helpful for, new members this year. And this is the time of year where we're deep in developing our list of priority projects. So a discussion on funding, I think, is very relevant. So let's start out with what our mission: to develop and foster realization of a regional multimodal transportation projects and programs that improve the quality of life for Brevard residents, businesses, and visitors. That's why we're all here, right? I mean, this is our job. And the primary role of the TPO is to prioritize projects that use state and federal funding. So we play an important role in allocating financial resources for transportation. So to make the most of this role, it requires working very closely with our DOT partners, through which federal dollars flow. And this is one of the most important things we do. And as my predecessor used to say, it's where the planning meets the money. And that's what it's about, bringing in those state and federal dollars that is going to provide a better quality of life for Brevard County residents. So transportation in a broad context includes all modes: space, seaports, aviation, et cetera. But for today's presentation, I want to focus on surface transportation. So to develop a comprehensive, safe, and efficient transportation system, it requires funding from a variety of sources: state, federal, local, and potentially private sector funding. For the State Transportation Trust Fund, DOT has three main sources of funding. And this is projected by the Revenue Estimating Conference, which is a group of economists up in Tallahassee that forecasts gas tax revenues, motor vehicle license fees, initial vehicle license, registration fees, and so on. We rely heavily on the State Transportation Trust Fund, and 2/3 of the revenue comes from the fuel tax. There is some from the rental car surcharge, I think it's $2, and some from dock stamps, but most of the funding comes from taxes on motor fuel. 25% is made up of federal funding, which is a federal apportionment and obligating authority, and then about 18% is made up of toll facilities. And those revenues are projected by independent traffic revenue studies, as Commissioner Smith pointed out. But all three of them have been impacted over the past year. Focusing on fuel taxes. This is really divided into three different areas. We have federal fuel taxes, which is 18.4 cents per gallon. State fuel taxes, which is now 14.5 cents per gallon. And then you have the additional 8 cents on every gallon. And then, of course, we have local fuel taxes, which are mandated by, some are mandated by the state, and some of this is local option taxes. Our federal authorization is Fixing America's Surface Transportation. We call it the FAST Act, which was signed into law in 2015. The FAST Act was a 5-year bill, and it provided over $300 billion, and it was set to expire December of last year, but was extended for 1 year. And it is likely that we will be getting a new authorization this year rather than another extension. So one challenge is that the TPO apportionment is based on the fiscal year 2009 allocation from the 2000 census. So, this is a high growth state, so we're not receiving the allocation due to us based on population growth. And hopefully that will change when the new census information comes out. So let's talk about federal funding specifically. So of course, every time you get a gallon of gas, you get 18.5 cents back from the federal government in fuel tax. It's not indexed to inflation. 90% of the federal funding comes from pennies per gallon of fuel tax, which, by the way, has not been adjusted since 1993. And so for those of you that are as old as I am, Seinfeld and Home Improvement were the top 2 television shows in 1993. It was a long time ago, and I love those shows. So we are selling less gas tax per vehicle due to increasing fuel efficiency and, of course, electric vehicles. The Highway Trust Fund balance has been at a steady decline, requiring federal general fund infusions every year to ensure its solvency. So state funding. The state fuel tax is more diversified, as you know, and it keeps pace with inflation because it does adjust each year automatically. It was raised 2 cents, I think, this year, the first of the year. The challenge at the state level is that alternative fuel vehicles and electric vehicles will continue to have an impact. In 2020, Florida had more than 60,000 registered electric vehicles. The latest study by FDOT showed that they will impact the Transportation Trust Fund by 2025. And by 2040, now this is an aggressive forecast, it shows a 30% reduction in gas tax revenue, and that's pretty significant, albeit, in 2040. And then our locally imposed fuel taxes. Now this is as of January of last year. The local option taxes are added, as you know, to an area's tax base for local infrastructure. So in the Central Florida area, 4 of the counties have fully leveraged their local option fuel tax. Sumter, Lake, and Seminole have not fully leveraged their local option, but they have added a penny. And Orange and Brevard County, as you know, have not leveraged any of their local option fuel tax. So 6 cents is not being levied. And I know that the County Commission has been delving into this issue in a budget meeting. And they're also potentially looking at the viability of an infrastructure sales tax. And to Commissioner Smith's point, sometimes I think not all of our citizens fully realize the visitor contribution to Brevard County, especially for the fuels tax and even potentially an infrastructure sales tax, which would really generate a lot of money. Local funds are important because we can't use state funding off the state highway system. With a few exceptions, TRIP and SCTPO, which it's state grant money that requires a 50% match. Unfortunately, we can't get our hands on that money unless you got 50% to match it. And that has been our challenge. So the regionally significant roads like South Babcock, Wickham, Hollywood Boulevard, Minton, Malabar West, we can't move those projects forward very quickly unless we're using federal dollars, and we know that that funding is dwindling and we can't get our hands on enough of it to actually fund the big ticket items for those projects. So that is, a challenge that we are all dealing with. So dealing with the balance sheet, what are we left here? The question is how to move forward with both federal and state revenue being challenged. And it seems, like we've been doing more with less. We're building fewer projects, or we're deferring projects, or we're building different types of projects. We may need to look at transit, more, use technology, ITS to improve safety and efficiency of our transportation system, and look for ways to be more cost effective. Or we can do more with more. We need to find new revenue sources. We need to be able to apply for those grants. We need to seek legislative changes to raise or index funds, which, by the way, is one part of our legislative priorities on the TPO level that we submit to the legislature every year. In February of this year, the rover landed on Mars, and I found, we found that very significant, and it was around the time that the county had their budget meeting. There are new companies moving in here every day. And with the financial situation on the state and federal level, it makes us question, is our transportation system going to be ready? And it's going to take everything that we have, state, federal, local, and private dollars, for us to get where we need to be as we move forward. So I'm going to end just some things we need to keep our eye on. There have been several federal acts provided to support transportation and replace federal funds that have been lost during the pandemic. So, of course, the CARES Act funding, the American Rescue Plan, $10.2 billion to Florida, and the governor said $2 billion will be used for transportation, and that is really good news. The American Jobs Plan, which is the proposal that still needs to be approved in Washington. I think the prediction is late summer, early fall. $2.3 trillion, $932 billion to infrastructure. It includes funding for EV, transit, airports, ports, safety, and equity. Highway funding is directed towards a fix it first rather than capacity, which could be problematic for Florida because we take care of our roads so well. So we're not really sure how this is going to pan out. But to prepare for this, I will say that the DOT District 5 office is being proactive. They have set up biweekly meetings with TPO, each one of the MPOs in the area, to talk about stimulus, in fact, we had our first meeting today to let us know what they know, which right now is not a lot, because we don't know how the money is going to come down. What are the stipulations to the money? What are the restrictions, the criteria, and there may be different criteria for the different pots of money. But all in all, our goal is to move as many of our priorities forward as we possibly can. And the other thing that the department is looking at is potentially advancing some projects that are fully funded in the work program, which would free up the funding in the out year, which would then allow us to add more projects. So there's still a lot of unknowns. And then finally, the FAST Act reauthorization. The FAST Act, as you know, is expected to expire September the 30th of this year. And, we're looking for a transportation bill that's going to give us hopefully some direction or guidance for the country as far as replacement of the motor fuel tax, if there's something that's going to be in that legislation. And then earmarks are back, probably. So we've heard that they're now called member designated projects. They're not called earmarks. But Congress members can submit projects up to 20 million that would be included in the reauthorization. And of course, we don't support earmarks if there's no money tied to it, which is typically the case on the state level. But if it's going to be included in this legislation, we would support it. And so we have contacted Congressman Posey along with some of our municipalities and Commissioner Zonka to ask him if Ellis Road could be at the top of that list. Of course, we need more than $20 million for Ellis, but every little bit of help, we'll take what we can get. And so we're hopeful about that. So, Madam Chair, that concludes my presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Georgiana regarding this item 7B? No questions, all right. Georgiana, there's no questions because it was such an excellent,
Well, I
thorough
hope so.
presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. All right, 7C, Sarah Crum.
All right. So, as you know, that annually we conduct we develop a list of project priorities and we go through a call for projects process for this list of project priorities. We are currently in the depths of that. We're nearing the end here. And in July, we will be bringing the list of project priorities to the governing board for formal adoption. And so in preparation for that meeting, we wanted to just give kind of an overview of the process and some highlights. The list is still very much draft. We'll go over the schedule a little later in the presentation. So where does the list of project priorities fit in our planning process? So we have our long-range transportation plan, which identifies projects. This can be either in the cost feasible plan, or it can also be within our boxed funds. And the boxed funds incorporate projects such as our bicycle pedestrian master plan, our ITS master plan, Vision Zero, corridor studies, things like that. And so there are a lot of different options of a project being in the LRTP. But basically, in order for it to feed into the list of project priorities, it has to be within that document. The projects are identified there, then local municipalities and partners have the opportunity to go through and submit projects that are identified in the LRTP during our annual call for projects. Those projects go into our list of project priorities, which then hopefully will eventually end up in our transportation improvement program. That means that it has money on it. So to kind of go further in to just that blue box, the call for projects process is basically the list of project priorities development process is essentially we make a call for projects. Applications are submitted. We go through evaluation and ranking, which is where we currently are. We then adopt the list of project priorities and we submit it and funding recommendations to FDOT. FDOT reviews the applications. They vet and meet with the locals to make sure that the projects are ready to go, or if there's outstanding questions or feasibility issues. Once a project is basically deemed ready to go, it can be programmed. We work very closely with FDOT to coordinate the programming, and then that feeds into the work program development. And eventually it becomes a local agency program project, or FDOT implements the project. So our schedule this year is basically on January 11th, we issued our call for projects. We then met with our transportation subcommittee on January 20th. And something new that we did is after our application deadline, which was March 15th, this year on April 6th, we actually met with our environmental partners. We learned through the last LRTP process that it's especially in our area where we have so many natural resources that it's really important to be coordinating with all of our environmental partners, not just our transportation partners and our municipalities. This was basically the purpose was to help us identify projects that might have some major environmental pitfalls in it, or to basically start kind of a coordination conversation where potentially environmental projects such as conversion of septic to sewer could be put within a roadway project if it was applicable, timelines, et cetera, because we don't want to dig up a road twice. So that was a new part that we added this year for our call for projects process. We will be taking the draft list next Thursday, a week from today, to our transportation subcommittee, and then on to the public meeting, BPAC, TACCAC, and eventually for adoption in July. So that's the schedule. Coming back along to basically what makes a project eligible and what projects can be put in the list of project priorities and how is it developed. So first off, is it in the LRTP? Next, is it functionally classified to receive federal aid? So basically, can it even receive federal funds? Is it ready to be implemented within the next 5 years? We want projects that are on there that if money becomes available, we can call the municipality or contact the municipality and say, hey, you ready to do this? Because we have the funding, not projects that can't be implemented because there's not staff resources or they're just not ready. Is the project consistent with local government comprehensive plans? Does it have local support? It doesn't necessarily have to be specifically spelled out in your comp plans, but there needs to be some sort of formal recognition by your council or committee recognizing the project and supporting the project. This also, by doing this, provides an opportunity for the public to have been informed or engaged in some way. And then finally, if the project is off the state highway system, is the agency certified to perform a local agency program project? Or do they have a partner agency that's willing to do it on their behalf? So once a project is deemed eligible, this year we did have a couple uneligible projects that we received. It then goes through the ranking process. It receives a quantitative score via criteria set out from our governing board strategic plan in the emphasis areas of safety, transportation and land use, sustainability and resiliency, innovation, and multimodal. It also can receive a qualitative score based on consensus from our transportation subcommittee. And finally, it can be going back to qualitative score. A qualitative score can't just be, I really want my project to get 10 more points. It needs to basically be projects that are regionally significant or have a deep impact to the community. There needs to be a reason that it deserves more points and to be ranked higher. Also, there is discretionary ranking. So after we go through the ranking process, if some things don't shake out, like for example, last year we requested discretionary ranking for Ellis because it needed to be at the top of the list. So any committee or board member could request that the board discretionarily rank something and it be voted on. So we did, as I said, we received a new number of applications this year. Some of them weren't eligible. The ones that were eligible, 2 of them were 2 projects that are just going back on the list. They were moved off due to funding reasons or had been previously funded. So one of those is the Traffic Management Center. Another is the Space Coast Trail. And then the other 4 were submitted by locals. We have State Road A1A in Satellite Beach from Volunteer Way to Roosevelt Ave. That's focusing on sidewalk gaps. State Road A1A, State Road 520 to International Drive. That's a complete street, basically a study for feasibility for a complete street curb and gutter type project submitted by Cape Canaveral. State Road 520, South Banana River Drive to State Road A1A. That was, we've been working with Cocoa Beach to submit that one as essentially a causeway vulnerability analysis. And then finally, Minton Road from Jupiter Boulevard to Malabar Road. That is submitted by Palm Bay for the feasibility of a widening. Some just kind of priority highlights. These are top priorities so far currently in the draft, but they're also historical priorities. And that's the biggest thing that I want to convey is that we have projects on here that have historical value and have been priorities for a very long time. So Ellis Road, State Road 528, all of the State Road A1A projects, it's clearly recognized as a corridor that needs safety improvements. The Traffic Management Center, Space Coast Trail, State Road 501, Clear Lake Road, Michigan Ave to Industry Road. That's a widening project. Very important because that is basically that curve where the new rail station is coming in, or rather, excuse me, the new railway. We don't know if railroad, we don't know if we'll get a rail station, but that's the property that they own. And so that Virgin owns. And so we want to be sure that we're putting in the improvements. So if Virgin does decide to put a rail station, we are able, the people are able to access it appropriately. Excuse my slip up. We don't know we're getting a rail station, but we want to improve that area. I mean, let's make it more enticing to give us one. And then State Road 514, Malabar Road, there's 2 segments, the east and west. So that is obviously not a full comprehensive list of all the priorities. And if your priority isn't listed, it doesn't mean it's not important. Those are just some kind of highlights that I wanted to bring up. The last thing that I want to mention is going back to Abby mentioned our open house. That is also an opportunity for the public to review the list of project priorities. So with that, I would be happy to answer any questions regarding the project prioritization process.
Any questions for Ms. Crum? No questions there. Sarah, I have a question. I had to speak at a group Tuesday night, and they were concerned about Hollywood Boulevard. So I pulled up the TPO, pulled up the hierarchy of projects, and their concern is number 29. Well, since this particular group I was speaking to, it's an age community. So we are sure it's not going to be done in our lifetimes, item number 29. So on your list there of priorities, where you said any board member been asked to bring things up, I think you've already done that, and it's as high as it can go. Am I wrong, or are there options to change the order?
I apologize. I do not have the draft list of project priorities in front of me at this time. I had a curveball where my son was sick today, so I'm a little out of sorts.
So
Sarah,
Sarah,
Georgina?
I'm sorry, I was just to mention to Councilmember Young, the one thing about Hollywood to keep in mind is that we can't use state funding on it, but we are working closely with the county about potentially using federal funding because the next phase would be the right-of-way, and I know that some of the right-of-way has already been purchased, and potentially get some SCTPO funding and match it, perhaps with a combination of local and federal. So we are looking at those options. So when projects are on the priority list, because each, depending on the type of project, they use different flavors of money, it doesn't mean all 20-something projects has to be done before we finally get to Hollywood. So that can be a little misleading, especially for the public, because they don't understand that. But we will be looking at all options to try and move that project forward sooner rather than later.
Thank you. Thank you very, very much, Georgiana. All right, next item is also Sarah, and that's Transportation Resiliency Master Plan Update.
And thank you, Georgiana. Yes, so as I'm sure most of you are aware at this point, we are in the middle of developing our Transportation Resiliency Master Plan. Because this is going to be a 2-year process, we wanted to give you some updates through the project process rather than come to you 2 years later asking for adoption of a master plan. So it's just a rather brief update. We are still in the early stages and some educational pieces. Oh, I bounced too many times. Okay, so we are developing the plan in kind of the pocket of the resiliency definition defined by the East Central Florida Regional Resilience Collaborative. And that's the ability to bounce forward, absorb, recover, and get better in the face of short-term shocks like hurricanes or infrastructure failures, and long-term stressors like affordable housing, aging infrastructure, shifting economic trends, and climate change. But we remember this is a transportation resiliency master plan, so we need to narrow in on what is transportation resiliency. And that is the ability of the transportation system to recover and regain functionality after a major disruption or disaster. So this, essentially what we're doing is we're building on previous work. In 2018, February 2018, we presented our sea level rise vulnerability assessment that really served as an awesome conversation piece for us to be able to start talking to our governing board and committees and the public about transportation resiliency. That then led to us feeding it into our governing board strategic plan as an emphasis area, into our project prioritization methodology, and also into the long-range transportation plan. But ultimately, what we recognized is that if we are actually going to move the bar on resiliency in our transportation system, that we need to develop a master plan. I mean, we have a bicycle pedestrian master plan, ITS master plan, Vision Zero. It's just it's another one of our focus areas that we needed a master plan to help us create a roadmap to resiliency. So that's the purpose, is develop a roadmap to a more resilient transportation system in Brevard, to identify shocks and stressors. When I say shocks and stressors, I'm referring to impacts. It could be, a large event such as a rocket launch that potentially causes severe congestion. It could be a hurricane. It could be sea level rise. It could be something as catastrophic as a boat hits one of our bridges. It basically anything that could impact our roadways. Prioritize roadways and corridors, and develop tools and tactics to address those prioritized roadways and corridors. So basically kind of the prioritization would be, what are the roadways most impacted and most important? And our schedule is October 2020 and through October 2022. So once again, it has a transportation focus, and essentially we have to answer what puts people and infrastructure at risk, which infrastructure are most important to protect, and what are the influence areas? Because as we all know, as citizens and flooding and traffic, they don't stop at city lines. They don't stop at county lines. It's all kind of interconnected, and we have to look at it as a system. So we do have a bunch of different ways that we're engaging people through this process. So different roles for the same goal, a more resilient Brevard. So obviously we are engaging our board and committees. We have a task force made up of, I believe it's about 56 people right now, that are representatives from all the municipalities, various organizations such as DEP, the Indian River Lagoon National Estuary Program, basically technical staff that would most likely be the ones implementing any kind of project, and also would know what their organization would support and sees as priorities. We'll be holding focus groups, kind of keyed in on the various shocks and stressors, basically talking to the experts about them. We've done a couple of stakeholder meetings, and we'll continue to do them. And then transportation disadvantaged meetings. So we actually held our first one yesterday, where basically we met with county organizations to discuss what are the needs of our underserved and transportation disadvantaged populations in regards to a more resilient transportation system. So far, we held one task force meeting, on January 28th, really to kick off the meeting. We developed a project website, environmental stakeholder work session, and also an economic stakeholder work session, which was just fascinating to get the two different views. We're really trying to basically find the areas that community, environmental, and economic all overlap, because those are important for resiliency. Tons of data collection analysis. And then also we've performed a transportation disadvantage analysis and area identification. We held our first meeting, as I mentioned, and we'll be reaching out to some smaller populations, kind of narrowed in populations, to really get the feel of the boots on the ground in those areas. So we have a little video on this one. We also have started a heavy public involvement campaign. We're doing public involvement kind of different this master plan than we've done before. And that's because that there is this gap between understanding resiliency, and we don't want to ask them to give us feedback on something that they don't understand. And so basically, the word resiliency, say that to a group of people, not everyone's going to know what resiliency means. Then you add transportation, and there's so many syllables that half people get lost. So we really needed to take a step back and start educating our public about what the master plan is, what is transportation resiliency, what are all these buzzwords and key phrases that we're using, such as shocks and stressors. So we developed goals, objectives, and performance measures. Basically, we want to educate, disseminate information, and get high-level feedback and input. We also developed the project website. We have started quarterly social media campaigns. In your agenda package, you should have our first resiliency relay, which is basically a snapshot of where the project is. And then we started doing community outreaches. So I've done 2 presentations so far. So for the social media campaign, we started off kind of conducting polls on Facebook, Twitter, and Nextdoor. And so we asked, 2 of the questions that we asked was, how familiar are you with the concept of transportation resiliency? So as you can see, about 67% of people said, what's that? And so that showed that we have a long way to go. We need to help our citizens and our partners better understand the words that we're using and what this means. And then we also asked them how concerned they were, and they said it was vital to their community. So our next steps is basically we want to continue the public outreach and education. Our next campaign will be in July. Transportation Disadvantaged Community Conversations. We have our next task force meeting where we're going to define which are our top shocks and stressors that we're going to focus on. And then we're going to begin focus group discussions regarding those shocks and stressors, and finally actually start to dive into the corridor analysis. And with that, I will take any questions.
Any questions for Ms. Crum regarding this area? Yes, Mr. Lober.
All right, Madam Chair, could we go back a couple slides?
Absolutely.
Thanks.
Oh, that's forward.
Too far. One more? Okay, that's the one. All right, I'm just curious in terms of the results. Looking at this, it looks like it was something that was put up on social media, maybe Facebook. Does that sound right?
This one was next door.
Next door, okay. Well, let me ask you, because I'm just surprised that 67% had what's that as a response of those that were already looking at the Space Coast TPO's page. I'm thinking that may or may not be representative of the community as a whole. I would tend to think that folks that are visiting the TPO's page are probably more knowledgeable than not, or more knowledgeable than the average bear. It's just odd to me, and I didn't know if you had any thoughts on that.
So we were having a issue with some of the algorithms. And so Nextdoor was our best response rate, which is why I use this as an example rather than, Facebook, like we only received 12. And we're pretty sure those are our friends and family that participated in it.
Hey, Sarah, it's Abby. Sorry, I just wanted to.
Thank you, Abby. I was about to call on you because you're going to be able to best explain the way Nextdoor works.
Sure. So Nextdoor doesn't really operate the same way as Facebook. Facebook and Twitter, you have the ability to go ahead and follow a page or like a page. But Nextdoor is a little different because it's based on neighborhoods and service areas. So we're actually housed underneath the Brevard County service area. So it's not the same where you can go and follow a page.
Okay.
It's more assigned to your zip code, if that makes sense. So some of these people don't know who we are. And actually we had a comment, I think on that first poll or maybe the first post that we did, somebody said like, how can I even give my input if I don't know who you are? So we went in depth and kind of explained what we do, how we work. And so it's not the same when it comes to usability as Facebook and Twitter. So just want to give some background there.
Thank you.
Thank you, Abby.
Any other comments for Ms. Crum before we close this? All right, thank you very, very much. Thank you. Thank you, Sarah. That was an excellent presentation. I did go to the website, the tinyurl.com/SCTPO It was a very good website. I'm sure others will enjoy it as well. So I'm part of your traffic on there.
Thank you.
All right, just a reminder, any comments at all? Any comments from anyone on the board?
I have one.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Jordan.
You know who I am now.
Never forget a face.
This was a great meeting for sure. Hey, I just saw on the news web that the CDC just announced that if you have been fully vaccinated, which means that you got your first one, the second one, you're 2 weeks out from that you no longer have to wear masks inside or out. So
great.
That's very good news for
That
us,
is wonderful
for sure.
news.
So we can get back to normal for sure. But, those who have not been vaccinated really need to continue to wear their masks. And if you don't know it, even though you have been vaccinated, you still could be carrying, and you can give it to those who aren't vaccinated. So if you got a business like I do, we certainly want to release the people to not wear masks. But if they're not vaccinated, then I would say, even though I've been vaccinated, I need to continue to wear a mask around my people to protect them who haven't been vaccinated. So just a word of caution.
Thank you. Thank
Still
you,
good
Mr.
news,
Jordan.
though, right?
Yes, still very, very good news. I'm hoping to get this over soon. We can move on with our lives, get them back. So thank you very much. Just a reminder, we don't meet in June. The next meeting is July 8th at 2 o'clock. Of course, the executive board meets at 1 o'clock, and we will at that time include the annual adoption of list of priority projects, and we will learn about intelligent transportation systems. And with that, can we get a motion to adjourn? Oh, Laura, hold on, wait a minute. Oh, Kim, I'm sorry. Thank you very, very much. Motion for Mr. Lober, second. All those in favor, stand up and walk out the door. Thank you. Thank you.
The opinions expressed by any member of the public during any period of public comment do not necessarily reflect the views or opinions of the Board of County Commissioners of Brevard County, Florida, Space Coast Government Television, or the program sponsor, and are solely those of the presenter. The Board of County Commissioners of Brevard County, Florida, Space Coast Government Television, and the program sponsor hereby expressly disclaim any and all responsibility or liability for any defamatory or slanderous statements expressed by any member of the public during any such period.